In this episode, we'll be discussing shaping and forming the top crest rail. We will be mortising the crest rails to receive the backsplats. I've got my crest rails all laid out, determined which order they should come in as far as what's the top and the bottom and what's the front and the back of the crest rail based on the grain patterns in each piece. We've made a template with a PantoRouter to make these mortises, and with the crest rail lined up to the center, I have a center mark on the crest rail board right here, and the center mark is marked here on the PantoRouter table. I'd simply line it up by bringing a straight edge just to the edge of both of those, and you can see that I have a good line up there. That's how I set it up with using some blocks in the front. I can ensure that it's always brought to the same angle and straightness level with the front of the PantoRouter table. You can see I've got it set here at 3/4 of an inch to do the outer mortises. The center mortise is going to be a 1/2 inch plus that extra 1/4 of an inch for the cutout here for the cloud lift in the center. So that has to be also 3/4 of an inch in order to get the full depth of my mortise. So I'll probably add like an extra 1/16 of an inch just to give that one a little bit of wiggle room, maybe a little bit more to be able to have more leeway on getting those pieces together. So normally I would be doing my routing with the dust collection system on, but that makes it a little bit hard for you to see what I'm actually doing. So just as a matter of course, for this first bit, I'm going to do this without the dust collection. And here I'm going to just move the depth a little bit further in. Before we do the tenons on the crest rail, we want to do the shaping of the top. The bottom piece is square, so it'll be really easy to line this pattern up against the block of wood, route this top section away, then this flat section will rest against the back of the jig to hold the piece as we do the routing, and then we'll route in this bottom cloud lift pattern. One additional point that I wanted to mention is that before I put this to the router, rather than hogging out all that material with the router, I'm going to go with a bandsaw and get kind of close to that shape, and that'll make it a lot easier on the router, and my time over there will be much better used. This is the jig we've made to hold our template as we route out the top and bottoms of the crest rail. The template goes onto the jig. The piece would go on top of that, gets locked into place, and the template itself will ride against the bearing on the router bit as we shape off the top. To do the opposite edge that's left by the router bit, because it's not tall enough to be able to manage that, I simply take the template off, flip my piece over, and I'd change this bit over to a different bearing so that it rides against the part that's already cleared away and cuts away the bottom part of the material, giving me a good match. I've shaped the crest rail with the cloud lift pattern on the top and the cloud lift on the bottom. The mortises are cut into the bottom. So the next step will be to cut away a block of material on either end of the crest rail so that I can put the tenons on the end without having to hog away a lot of material using the PantoRouter. I cut an inverse pattern out for the top so that I can just set some pieces right on top of there. It was out of a solid block about an inch thick, and the full width and height of the crest rail. These pieces, then, I cut that shape out first, and then I simply laid my pattern for the crest rail on top and cut out these two arcs. Same thing for the bottom part. Since this part gets cut away on the bottom side and the top side, I can remove a lot of material just using the bandsaw rather than having to use a grinder or a spoke shave or something to remove all that material. So all I have to do is take the crest rail, lay it on its side, put the bottom shape down, and it matches perfectly against it. Just draw against that, and then I know where I can cut that line out. The top one similarly rests with it flat down onto the surface, and then I just draw that top shape in. For the inside, this is just an indication line that I'm going to have to take it down by a grinder or by hand up on the top part, but that whole part is hollowed out kind of in an arc like this. A 1/2 inch bit, so a 15mm guide bearing yields a 3/8 of an inch tenon. My adjustments show that I didn't want that set all the way back to the rail, but you can see I have a little bit of a gap where I brought that forward just a tiny bit in order to get that fine adjustment so that these tenons fit perfectly into the legs with just the right amount of grab, not too tight, not too loose. So in order to obtain my depth of cut on the PantoRouter, it's really quite simple. What I did to make sure that I'm cutting away exactly to the line there, I'm just a hair shy, and that's on purpose. I'd rather go a little bit shy, and if I need a little bit more, I can bump that out just a tiny bit. But that should clean that line away very nicely. And here we have my routed tenons on the end. You can see it went straight on down perfectly to that line, leaving, I don't know if you can even see it, but there's just the tiniest bit of the line left, which is perfect. I've used the bandsaw to carve out the front edge and the back two corner profiles of each of my crest rail pieces. I still have a little ways to go, so that I won't have to be shaving the ends of the crest rail down to the exact width in order to fit them into the house mortises. But this is my mortise, so I can determine exactly what my height and width of the mortise is going to be to house that crest rail in. Set it to a height that comes out to exactly that same width as my mortise is, plus about a thou just for margin of error. Want a nice close tight fit on that. You can see that the distance that the housing is going to be at the bottom edge, it's right about a 1/2 inch. So I'll make this thickness of the end consistent by placing it upside down to about 5/8 of an inch on each end. And down here where it touches, I can set my guide to that 5/8 of an inch. A nice shaped crest rail with a skipping profile at the top, and back here we're going to carve away the bottom edge of it to make the final shapes and have a nice piece that begs to be touched. What I've done is we've got the front part of it carved away. We've carved away the back part, which in hindsight is kind of a mistake. I would do that after I take care of the shaping of the front next time, so that I have a nice flat surface to work on the front shaping. When I go to work on the back, I'll have two parallel surfaces that I can put down on my bench So it won't be as much of an issue there. I won't need to support it. So what I've done is taken actually a large salad bowl as my arc, drawn it in equidistant from the ends, and then also 1 inch up from the center of this, the cloud lift at the bottom. Spoke shaping, the crest shaping. I used a spoke shave, crest rail, shaping, spoke shaping, crest shaping. I used a spoke shaping, crest rail, shaping, spoke shave, crest shaping. I used a spoke shave, crest rail, shaping, spoke shaping, crest rail. I used a spoke shave, crest rail, shaping, spoke shave, crest rail. I used a spoke shave, crest rail, shaping, get down, crest rail, spoke shaping, get down, crest rail, rough shape, finish, get down, finish. To finish the crest rail shaping, I used a spoke shave to get it down to the rough shape, and then finished that off with sander starting with about an 80 grit and moving on up to the higher grit of 220 to get the final shape. The very last edges, the roundovers on these edges, will come after I've got everything set in place in the chair.